Right, for you guys that want the really quick answer, that's a thin rod. That's a thin rod. That's a thin rod. That's a better picture. That's a thin rod. That's the same one again. That's a thick rod. And that's a thick rod. Right, if you want to know more, watch the rest of the video. Okay guys, it's Calvin from the Coaching Company News. I woke up this morning to looking at this photo when I was doing my normal look over Facebook, do some emails, check messages, and the question was, is this a thick rod or a thin rod? And this question comes up lots. And what's really interesting on this one is guys started telling the poster that this was a thin rod engine. Funnily enough, there was another thread with a very similar question. This one here. That picture. Same deal. Thin rod or thick rod. There was only a few answers on this one, and they were correct on this one in most cases. Right, so let's have a discussion over thick rod and thin rod, okay? Because this comes up lots. And I'm going to do another video and another video and another video until this subject is closed, okay? Because we've got better things to talk about than talking about whether this is a thick rod or a thin rod on a 30-year-old engine. That we should have this knowledge. It should be out there now. So I'm going to do this. Now, caveats, this is a guide. Of course, if the engine's been swapped, I'll do a swap where I change all the thin rod stuff and put it on a thick rod and vice versa. SC400s. I'll put up a card somewhere. With regard to the problems with the late ones of those. So let's talk about LS400s, Celsior engines. Now, this one, though it's out of the picture, the original picture was kind of crappy. Wait, there it is. There's the original picture, and I think that's a fan. See right there? Is that a fan? If that's a fan, that makes it an LS400 engine. Okay, non-EGR LS400, because Celsius have a hydraulic fan. Okay, now this information does apply to Celsius, the same sort of stuff, because Celsius and LS400s are the same basic car with their own little differences just to make it fun. Okay, but this, as far as engine block, thick rod, thin rod, Celsius, LS400, it's the same. Okay, let's go back. If I go down here, if I click that one, we've got this engine. Right, first thing we see, we've got a fan, so it's an LS400, okay? Again, SC400s and Saurus have a hydraulic fan, so that takes them out of the picture. We're focusing LS400. We've got cover, 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 cover. Makes it a UCF10, which is a thick rod. Really easy. Let's find a UCF20 photo, shall we? And if I'm clever, I might be able to put them beside each other. Oh, it's pixelated, buggery, but see this big cover? There you go. That's a thin rod. And look at the airflow meter. That's a plastic body airflow meter. We can't see the airflow meter in this one, but that one would have an alloy body airflow meter with a plastic sensor. Or math, if you want to call it a math. This one, look at that. See that big cover? Okay. And that's why you don't have this. They don't have that because it's got this big cover over the top of the engine. Okay. We don't have individual, 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 and individual. Thick rod. Okay. Next thing. I'm just going to get rid of this one. Ooh. See that igniter? 201. So they will either be a 1, 2, 3, normally, or a 201 in the UCF10s. Then, if it's a UCF20, it has a CHD1 on the igniter. Not interchangeable, different igniters. Thick rod. Right, what are the differences? Well, someone brought up, see these plugs, these connectors? ECU connectors is a good way of looking at whether it's a thick rod or a thin rod, or what ECU is with it. Now those connectors are shared between the 92 to 94 UCF10s and the UCF 20s non-Vvti. So that's 94 to 97. American guys are going to be upset because they didn't see it till 95. We got them in 94. But UCF 10s have, see these multiple plugs? If it was a UCF 20, it would have a big 26 pin white plug with a little clip on it. I'll put a video in how they guys get those wrong, okay? It's a UCF 10, 92 to 94. Thick rod. Righto, what other differences could we be looking for? See this throttle body? Very much UCF 10. Now I'm going to go, just wait, watch this, and I think I've got, what's this one? Yeah, that's UCF 20, but it's kind of small. That one's better, eh? Now, can I put them both together? Woo! Okay. Now, that's a really nice one. Let's look at this throttle body. That one's pretty much as big. See that it's got a big fitting on the top here? Well, this one's got small individual hoses. That's UCF 20. That's UCF 10. Though there are some differences with these hoses. Some of them don't have that many. That's because this is a full emission EGR. It's got extra hoses. So on a Celsior non-EGR, you wouldn't see as many hoses. Thick rod, thin rod. And then it brings us to the next one, which is, see that fuel rail? Cast round fuel rail. And no fuel pressure regulator. Okay. This one, now it's really hard to see, but there's a fuel pressure reg right here. I can't blow it up in this form, can I? No. And you see this engine here? Actually, while we're here, see that Celsior engine because it's got the hydraulic fan right there. And we can tell it's an LS400, not a Sora engine because the dipstick's only a little, oh, you can't see my fin. A little short one. Soras have a big long dipstick top plastic bit. Okay. These water hoses are also different. Blah 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 blah. But UCF 20. So let's get rid of the UCF 20 and let's try and find that fuel pressure regulator, eh? See right there? That's the fuel pressure regulator in front of the throttle body. You'll also spot just there by my little hand, that's a square fuel rail. So if you want to play proper detective, that's a square fuel rail, fuel pressure regulator at the front, in front of the throttle body. Guess what? It's a thick rod. Right. Now, a couple of other things. Coil. If the tower of the coil is pointing up, thick rod. It's pointing forward, thin rod. It'll be the other way that way because the camera's backwards. Okay, so one coil is mounted on an upright and the other coil is mounted sideways. Thick rod, thin rod. Capper covers, they're different. So the thick rod has about a 19 millimeter breather going into them. Okay, and the thin rod, it's about a pencil. It's about a 10 mil. Okay, thick rod, thin rod. That's really easy to tell, eh? So if you've got a little tiny pecker, that's a thin rod, and if you've got a big one, it's a thick rod. That's the main stuff to look out for. Okay. Now there's also a UZS crown, UZS 131 crown. Okay, different ECU plugs, dipstick through the head, thick rod. Then there's a 141 crown, same ECU as a Sora, so it's got a 40-40-40 thick rod. Then they go to a 151 crown, which has got a thin rod. Oh, see these plugs here? It's also shared by one of the SC400s and Saurus. It's an oddball one, but it's got different body plugs, okay? And then we're going to have the rear sump, and we're going to have a hydraulic fan. And the sump is another way. So front sump, the difference between a Celsior LS400, so they will have a front sump, and that is in the non-Vvti because it changes later in the 3Zs. And then you've got the SC400 and the Sora, which will have a rearward sump. The mid sump comes from a 131 crown, and it is in the middle different. You guys get confused there. I've probably got a video somewhere. We'll put a tag, we'll put a thingy up there, or wherever, somewhere. Right, that's given us a pretty good overview of this one. We know, given the external characteristics of the engine, that it's highly likely, if it is a virgin engine, that it's going to have, no, if it's 100%, if it's a virgin engine, that thing's going to have thick rods in it, okay? The only chance it's going to have thin rods is someone's done a motor swap and swapped all the accessories over, okay? It might have been done a long time ago. It wasn't done yesterday. Thick rod. Right. Let's find the other one, shall we? We're going to go this one. Now, the original picture was actually crappy. It was like that. Can't really see it much. Kind of looks funny. And looking on my phone, I would have got this one wrong. So that's why I've come to the laptop. Right. Let's have a look. Excuse me. Okay. Let's look at the characteristics of this. Straight away we go to the ECU. You'll notice it's got different plugs to the last one. It's got 2 rows of pins. It's got a 26, 22, 16, 26 upside down. That is the first version of UCF 10. UCF 10, thick rod. Now, the difference between this one and the other engine I was showing you, was that one? Let's see if I can just tick the box, eh? So this one, that ECU doesn't run a cold start injector, and so this one does. Okay, so this one's older than this one, and cold start injector, thick rod, because they took them away on the later ones. But just because it doesn't have that doesn't mean it's not a thick rod, okay? Because both of those are thick rod engines. This one has a cold start injector, and this one, it doesn't. Both thick rod. Right, we've got these fuel hoses, look at this, coming out the bottom. Distinctive early UCF 10. So that's UCF 10, thick rod. Look, there's that cover, same as that one, not the big cover all over the top. Here we go. I'm sure that's got a fan on it, so it's likely to be LS400. It's not a crown engine, though it could be Celsior because it could be my eyes playing up there. Going into here, oh, I can't zoom in when I've got that one on there. We'll get rid of that. If we actually look at this connector here, see that connector there? It's only got 6 pins on it. And the early ones of these, again, because of that cold start injector, 6-pin solenoid on the transmission, 6-pin solenoid plug, thick rod. Oh, you see, there's your short dipstick compared to this dip. So that bit, well, the top bit, the little plastic bit. Okay, any other distinctive things on here? Individual covers. Cover there. Can't really see the throttle body. Another interesting note, actually, guys, is the back of the cylinder heads does alter on these engines, the way it's been machined. I'll probably have to go through that another day, should I? But there is a difference in the cylinder heads, but they're critically the same. Okay. Oh yeah, look at that. There's your sump at the front. There's your oil filter housing. But the oil filter housing is shared between the thick rod and the thin rod, so that isn't going to be a distinctive distinction, and nor is the sump, but it does distinguish it between LS400 or the LS series LS Celsior and the SC series. We can't see the size of the breathers. We could actually get into, see this back crossover? They're different, but the problem is Toyota reused the early one onto some of the later crowns. So that difference between Gen 1 and Gen 2, sort of, but then Gen 2, they still run a Gen 1 on some crown, as I said. All right, I think that's pretty much summed us up, okay? So that's a thick rod. I go down here. Come on, give me some pictures. That's a thick rod. That's a thick rod. That'd be a thin rod if we could see it. Oh, that's a small one. That's a thin rod. Oh, we could look at the wiring looms and how the thick rod have that come through the center. Blah 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 blah. Oh, do we see the? Can we see the coil on this one? Oh, look, we can. There's the coil tower going forward. Oh, and I'm putting my head on the side because I can. Idle speed control units swapped over in the UCF10, so you can't use that. Can't see the breather. Now, there was actually mention of traction control, and I can't really see a throttle butterfly. See, that's the sub TPS for the traction control. And on this one, I can't see a sub TPS, so that might be the sub TPS. So sometimes they have track written on there, and sometimes they don't, or TRAC track. Yeah, that's track. I should explain, because I get guys asking whether their car's got traction control or doesn't have traction control. It's because it's got a second butterfly and it's got a second TPS, sub TPS. But anyway, we've got that sorted. That's a thick rod. That's a thick rod. That one's a really small picture of a thin rod. That's a really small picture of a thin rod. That's a thin rod as well. And that's a thin rod. Come on, because of the big cover. Hope that's been helpful. Talk to you again soon. Catch you later.